Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Growing Up with Godzilla. This is my show where I have conversations with Godzilla fans about how they've grown with the character and franchise over time. We are in the midst of season 4. There have been many familiar faces returning, there have been some new faces appearing, and the face that you will see this evening is a familiar face, one who has graced this little stage that I have in the past. It's been a while, though. It's been a couple of years, I think. And I'm eager to have a conversation because I think we're going to have a really cool conversation. So I would like to welcome on the ever so wonderful podcast host, bonus feature producer, director, and writer, Elijah Thomas of Kaiju Conversation. Hello.
Hi, Donnie. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I really appreciate it.
And it's funny because I could have even added more to that title. I could have added, Kaiju United stuff and all of that jazz too. Like there's such a prolific set of things. So I think that's wonderful. So what have you been up to? What's been going on? How's life going?
I'm trying to remember. I think last time I was on was about 2 years ago, maybe a little more, a little less. So, there's been a lot of podcasting. I got a new job. Both of my jobs have changed actually. My side job that I added on, and then my normal job. I've changed positions there. But I scored a job with SRS Cinema, which is pretty cool. I have been a creative consultant on an action figure. I was nominated for a Rondo. Um, I've directed a couple of short films since then. I'm attached to an anthology movie coming out soon. It's been a roller coaster.
At this point, the projects are creating themselves, right? But that's wonderful, though. Like that means that your skills are being put to use and people are recognizing you for your capabilities and your creativity. And I think that's wonderful.
it's it's both a blessing and a curse, as people would say. It's like you said, like sometimes they just kind of, I just got a message the other day. um I can't be specific with it, but it was, hey, this is coming, get ready. So that's, it's gonna be a project that's a little stressful because there's a lot of hype around it. um
Mm.
in about a year, a little less than a year, everybody will know what it is.
I
But
can tell that it's taking every fiber of your energy to
it's
withhold the information.
it's I'm excited. I sent in a group chat like some some like just random gifs of like me being excited because it's like I want to talk about it. I want to share with everybody, but I can't because it's
Mhm.
not my place to share. But when that announcement does come, it will be very exciting and very stressful because I might be attaching myself to a project that will be very big, to coincide with that announcement. But on top of all of that, just whatever I do with that, it will be, I'll stress myself out to the point of, I'll be freaking out like, is this worthy of it or what? But
Um,
that's just kind of that's the name of the game here. It's
well,
the
just this
we're not
isn't your first.
worthy.
Yeah, I mean the imposter syndrome thing. I totally get it. Like I periodically still experience that myself, but you've demonstrated your capabilities. You have the background. You have the skill. Like you absolutely deserve those opportunities, right? So, but no, this is really exciting. I'm happy to see that you've been doing all of this work. But I mean, you are here for me to pry knowledge out of you about Godzilla, right? Because that's one of my favorite pastimes. But so obviously this is your second time appearing in Growing Up with Godzilla. I tend to like to explore a few different things. So the first question that I would like to ask you, I mean, obviously this has been like a huge past year and a half, 2 years for Godzilla. What has changed for you as a Godzilla fan over these past couple of years? Has there been any perspectives that have changed about particular movies, characters, impressions of different characters that have shifted? What has shifted for you, or what has grown for you?
Okay, when you said before the recording, like these are going to be layered, you weren't kidding. So okay,
I seldom kid.
I'm just gonna start off with the layer, the Godzilla fan title, and then kind of work my way down. Because for me, I'll start with this preface. For me, the concept of like being a fan is slowly starting to change. And maybe you know a little bit about this because I mean, personally, I'm of the opinion like you're in one of our group chats, I put your nickname as Mr. Official Godzilla Writer because like you've had that,
Yeah.
that's I couldn't do that. I would never be like I'd back out. I couldn't do it. So like that's really
I
awesome.
think you're good. I think you're
I
good. I think
don't
you're
know.
selling yourself short.
I would put way too much pressure. Like just the thoughts getting me like hot here. We're gonna
I
ignore the
think you
fact
kind of,
it's summer.
Elijah, you kind of thrive off the pressure, though. Let's be honest.
Yeah, you're
You
right.
thrive off of it. So, and I say that because I also thrive off some sort of pressure. So,
It's a little fun. The adrenaline, the
but it does change things. Like, I definitely, like, when you start, like, active work on various projects where you're connected to the IP in some way, like, it can really change people's perspectives of you. It can really, it is a little intimidating sometimes. But it's also surreal because it's like, did I just catch lightning in a bottle, or is is this a one-time thing? Will it ever happen again? Yeah, so it's interesting navigating that space where you're like, I'm still a Godzilla fan, but there's still like some active involvement
right.
that has shifted my impression just a little bit. Not in a negative way, it's just, and I would say in a more encompassing way.
So for me, I mean, I'm gonna I don't remember the whole conversation we had the first time around, but I'm gonna kind of build off of that, right? So since then, uh I've probably done over 50 episodes of the podcast, right?
Mhm,
And one of the biggest things from the podcast side alone is we have switched gears a little bit to really dive into like what is each film we cover. And for me, one of the biggest things is like I have learned a lot more about how things actually are viewed and looked at in Japan. One of my favorite things is, in America specifically, we talk about like, oh, there was the Showa era, the Heisei era, the Millennium era, Hollywood movies, and now the Reiwa era.
mhm,
But actually, in Japan, like even though yes, that's like how they're marketed, like the Showa era is mostly broken up into like two big waves. The
mhm,
first kaiju boom and the second kaiju boom. The first one was 1966 to 1968, and the second was 1971 to 1974.
mhm,
And in between those was like the yokai boom. Yokai started getting popular in 1968 and up until 1971. The whole thing there. And so like learning some of the events that were going on at the time has made me like completely recontextualize some films.
mhm.
The fact that like I can't watch a Gamera film and not think, oh, this is very, very much a government propaganda film.
Mhm.
Like watching Gamera, and in the back of my head, I'm like, the friend to children, this dude is like supporting like the deforestation of Japan right now. Like that stuff is wild to like
It's
kind of.
interesting that you mentioned that because I've been kind of processing that recently too. So I'm sure you're aware that I recently had Dr. Jeffrey Ingalls on the show. The Luminous
Great
Fairies
episode.
and Mothra. Woo! I'm so excited. But like there was a lot of like historical context that he shared throughout his research about the socio-political commentary that the film Mothra was responding to regarding the Anpo protests that took place a year earlier. This is like I didn't know this information, and I was just like, I was like, I knew there was some sort of political commentary in Mothra, but now I have more concrete details. So now when I watch it, I'm going to be like, there's those layers.
No, it's been wild because like the wild thing is like this is my favorite fact that I know now. And actually, well, it's kind of a dissertation to be honest. Um because there's so many moving parts. So to kind of summarize it. So, and this is kind of a little bit of a tidbit of so we recently did a recording on The Green Slime.
Mm-hmm.
Um the 1968 Toei co-production with Ram Films and MGM. So in that one, we kind of finalize our reanalysis of the Showa era before the 70s. And so here's the wild thing. You know, everybody talks about how like 1967, the year of kaiju, you have Ultraman wrapping up, you have Ultra 7 beginning its airing, you have Ninja Akage finishing up its airing on television. You have Master Kage getting its first of 3 compilation films with Ninja Scope. You have Son of Godzilla, King Kong Escapes, Gappa the Triphibian Monster, The X from Outer Space, Gamera versus Gyaos. You've got Kaiju Buska, I think that was 66 to 67, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There. Um, I don't need to list off everything, but like the point's there, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
1967 was a huge year. It's actually the death of the genre. It was not like this big renaissance. Like that was the year before and like everything prior.
Mm-hmm.
1967 is the death of the genre in its entirety. Um, because the only reason that literally over half of the kaiju films of the time, so Gappa, X from Outer Space, and Gauss happened is because the Dai president, Masashi Nagata, pushed the Japanese government to begin a thing called the Japan Film Expert Association,
Mm-hmm.
which helped fund Japanese films in the hopes that they would get distributed overseas.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that Nagata was very, very like keen on since Rashomon, the Akira Kurosawa film, did
Mm-hmm.
amazing overseas. He was like pushing ever since then. And so what happened was they started shelling out so much money just because like they the I've looked over some of the diets meeting from 1970, and essentially what it was oftentimes companies would just submit pitches for like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is a movie we're doing, here's how it could be marketed overseas, and they would get millions of yen for it.
Mm-hmm.
And the producers would take that money and put it under the table, and
Oh.
they would gain from it. So instead of giving Gappa, X from Outer Space, Gauss, and like Daimajin, the third Daimajin film, uh, Daimajin Strikes Back or Wrath of Daimajin, um, that had like funding from the Japan Film Export Association. Gamera versus Viras did. The Snow Woman's another one. So Nikatsu, Shochiku, and Dai all like took that money and they like used it for personal gain.
Ah.
Toho and Toei, however, didn't, but they were banking on co-productions. UPA
Mm-hmm.
did Frankenstein, Astro Monster, Gargantuas. Rankin Bass did King Kong Escapes. And you notice that by 1966, Godzilla, which everybody thinks is like the number one brand for Toho, Godzilla was the B side. It was Fukuda, Sato, and Arikawa, not Honda, Tsuburaya, and Ifukube, because the co-productions had the A team, and the not co-productions had the B team. And so Godzilla was a B team type of
Mm-hmm.
character. And we know, thanks to John LeMay, that Destroy All Monsters was the last Godzilla film planned, but they were going to co-produce with Freeway Film Productions on new Godzilla movies. So Destroy All Monsters was, for all intents and purposes, the last Japanese Godzilla film planned. before co-productions,
Interesting.
and that all fell through. And then we get All Monsters Attack in 1969 instead of a co-production.
Hmm.
So between the Japan Film Export Association, which was a money laundering scheme basically for the execs of the lesser but bigger Japanese studios, and the lack of co-productions for Toei and Toho, led to the death of the kaiju genre. Um,
Wow.
I there's like a ton more that like I've covered in like 7 episodes of the podcast. Like there's so many layers to it, but that's like been a huge thing for me, is like recontextualizing the entirety of basically 1965 to 1975,
Yeah.
like completely recontextualized.
And I think that's something that a lot of Godzilla fans, I feel like it's information that we would benefit from, but I think it's also information that we keep at arm's length because we often forget, I would say, that these films were, of course, designed to make money, right? That is what films do. They are designed to entertain and they are designed to make money. They are great escapist opportunities and we have so many connections to them. But if you look at the logistics behind them, the executive production decision making, like I feel like it can be very revealing of like how the films take shape, right?
And my biggest so all of this information is stuff that I've really dived into. And like for me it's like, okay, I never see that discussion, right? I've
Mhm,
not seen people talk about how The Green Slime is a very racist movie, or
mhm,
Gauss is government propaganda, or
mhm,
the fact that Godzilla was not a popular IP whatsoever, in
mhm.
terms of like making it the A films, right? Like all of that's briefly talked about in if in a historical context, just across the board. I'm not saying everybody does it that way, but generally speaking, that's what we see in the world of kaiju academia. Is this
Yeah.
like, oh, these were happening at the time, but that's really all we do.
Well, I think a lot of people, and if anyone understands this, I for sure do, a lot of people don't feel comfortable having those conversations because many people partition it into categories of like, oh, well, you're just trying to, you know, serve something or create conflict or whatever. And it's like, no, like this information is out there. It takes a lot of research. And I think it does deserve to be discussed because it's a really cool part of the franchise's history that we love so
Mhm.
dearly, right? So we explore those things out of as a form of respect and as a form of enriching the content and the franchise. So that's why I have conversations about like things like representation in the media. And sometimes I will have those conversations about historical context as well. Like I think there are spaces. That's why I do the show. So, um, well, so here's a little bit more of a personal question for you. Now, and this is kind of situational, it requires some imagination. But if you could go back in time to your younger self, what valuable wisdom from the Godzilla franchise would you impart to young child Elijah?
Oh boy. So, okay. I'm gonna I have a lot. Like there's so much really to like break down here. Because that, like, even for that first question, right? That's just one aspect of it. There's
Mhm.
multiple other ways to look at it as well. Um,
Absolutely.
you know, it's one of these things where it's like I was actually like a couple weeks ago, I was watching your discourse with other people in the community on
Oh, yeah.
the community,
Mhm.
um, which I have opinions and thoughts, but this isn't really the place for that. But at one point, there is that discussion
Mhm.
of younger people in the fandom. And, at one point that was me, right? At one point I
Yeah.
was the younger person in the fandom. But you also know, Donnie, that I don't like having like firm like beliefs in one thing or another. I like listening and kind of building facts off of what I learn and what I hear,
Hmm.
and the experiences I see and also go through.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing that I am very like dead set on is let the younger people, and I'm putting myself in there too. I'm not trying to uh put anybody down or
For sure.
point fingers, because I put myself in that exact same like label. I don't like putting younger people down or trying to disregard what they say.
Yeah.
That is something I have experienced. It's been difficult for me, especially because I mean, I did an audio commentary track for a movie at the age of 19.
Hmm.
You know,
Which is huge.
I had to be an expert on that movie, and that commentary got widely distributed out into
Hmm.
retail, right? So for me, it's something, even though I like know so much more now, just like whether it's experiences working on stuff or the fact that like I have friends who have worked on my favorite movies,
Hmm.
um or like any of that, I would keep that away from my younger self, because I love the fact that my younger self got to grow
Hmm.
and be thrown the curveballs of, well, you're 19 years old, you're going to do an audio commentary that's going to get put on a disc and mass marketed and mass distributed, and the director is eventually going to get his hands on this release, and he's going to look at your work, and
Hmm.
you're being the person talking about his movie.
Yeah.
So you better figure it out, So and it goes back to what you brought up, like I love being under the pressure. I definitely do. That's something that, being under that pressure, having that like not being able to move, makes
Hmm.
me more open to like sponging everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so yeah, I don't think I would tell myself anything. I think I would let myself, like, just like I said, I don't want to know
Mhm.
the questions beforehand. I love getting thrown curveballs and having to figure out how I'm going to catch this thing.
So spontaneous. No, I think that's a very interesting and thoughtful response. Well, and going back to, like, I know you said you watched the conversation I had with Kaiju Canuck, D-Man, and Rick the Squirrel, but I I do think that, I mean, we know that there's a lot of gatekeeping in the Godzilla fandom, right? And I will often see younger Godzilla fans be stifled by other Godzilla fans who may feel threatened by them in some way, or maybe they find excitement exhausting. And it's like, no, we were all that person at one point in time. Like, I remember being that person. I still can be that person sometimes. And I think that there is a space for Godzilla fans of all walks of life to do what they do, enrich the franchise, enrich the content by adding to it in what way that they can, and no one should be gate kept out of that. So, and I have seen some of that like behavior that you've had to deal with too, and it's like it can be dismissive. Like, I know we walk into these situations like kind of pretending, well, not pretending necessarily, but taking the higher road, right? But at the same time, I think any frustration that you might experience is completely reasonable, like when dealing with that type of behavior. So, but no, so like I think that you navigated it well, and I think that the feedback that you would give your younger self by not giving feedback is very unique and interesting. Ooh, ooh. Well, Now, I don't think this will be a question that you'll be able to do a reversal on, but we'll see. Which largely unpopular Godzilla film is your guilty pleasure?
Here's a little bit of a reversal here.
Elijah, damn it. I'm kidding.
So we're gonna kind of go back to the first question a little bit. We talked about the
Mhm.
podcast. But on another level, now like I work with SRS Cinema. So
Yeah.
we work on films. I have, the thing I'm talking about, we had a meeting 2 months ago, and I said, "Hey, Ron, here." And we talked about it, and it led to some conversations, and it happened. Um, Really cool. Whenever I can say like I had a hand in getting this out,
Yeah.
um, it's exciting. So because of stuff like that, I have shifted my focus from really being in tune with what is guilty and what is not guilty. And a lot of that also comes from the simple fact that on my show, we don't look at critical reviews. We don't look at like what is being said, because for me, I remember the generic opinions being what Cinemassacre,
Mhm.
Angry Video Game Nerd, James Wolfe, however you want to call him, said back in Godzillathon. That's
Yeah.
the generic opinion that I remember. But that also was almost, in a couple of years, that'll be 20-year-old videos, which I don't like that. I
Oh
don't
my
like
god.
that.
Oh my god. Ooh, I'm decaying.
Um, so I don't know what is a generic opinion and what's a guilty pleasure anymore.
So maybe instead of looking at them as largely unpopular Godzilla films, like which film that you find yourself gravitating toward a lot that tends to be underappreciated is the one that you pick up, that you revisit?
I guess I feel like these are basic answers, but I'll kind of back
No,
them.
these are great answers. These are great answers.
Um, I do. I remember when we covered the Showa Godzilla films, like I found new appreciation in films like All Monsters Attack and Godzilla vs. Hedorah, primarily for the historical context. Um, I said it in my podcast episode, and I'll say it again here. I got to watch some news reels from 1971 filmed in Suruga Bay, Japan,
Hmm.
and the images that the newscasters got on film is exactly what Yoshimitsu Banno did in his movie. Um, there are shots of sludge that has a bunch of random stuff in it floating in the bay.
Hmm.
There are fish on the top of the sludge, dead. There is dead things just floating in the bay next to next to where you would walk up and be at the edge of the water. Um, so the fact that like that imagery is not um fiction, it is not
Hmm.
imagination, and I think that's something a lot of people will relate Hedera to 54, because I mean Bono was an understudy of Honda, and Bono was kind of approaching it the same way. But I mean, 54 opened up with a bright flash of light and fire and people being burned. That was what they had witnessed with the Daigo Fukumaru incident, March 1st of 1954.
Hmm.
That's same premise. They, if you were near Suruga Bay, or if you just watched the news in 1971 Japan,
Hmm.
you would have seen the exact same things that you would be seeing in that film. Um, Seeing, honestly, I think one, like the reason All Monsters Attack has kind of grown on me is also just the fact that if you look at that film, um, and in a modern context, the idea of like, especially with COVID, so many people had to grow up fast. You see Ichiro growing up and his mother weeping at the end of the film, which apparently there's an edit where that's the end of the film. That hammers home the idea of what Ishiro Honda was getting at, is like children are having to grow up because of negligence of parents and just the society as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So like those have been a huge thing. I mean, I think I've said this too, like on the record. I think I've said that it's weird where like for Gamera, I have found more things to dislike about the franchise. For Godzilla, I have found a reason to like everything I've rewatched, whether it's Son of Godzilla or Ibra or All Monsters Attack. I didn't enjoy Destroy Monsters on my rewatch. That's probably one where it's like, oh yeah, I ended up
Mm-hmm.
not liking that one as much as I remember. I have found, I don't know if there's a guilty pleasure, but I have found reasons to appreciate and like all of these films. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that like I do extensive research on any film I watch essentially now, because mostly it's for either SRS or Kaiju Conversation. So I have to know that stuff. I have to
Right.
be able to talk about it in some sort of authoritative opinion or something.
I think that like the combination of those films, like I think that's a great re-examination of them for sure, because there are so many layers. Like I think that's the theme of the episode, layers, right? There's so many layers that I think that we we get really caught up in the escape and we don't see the layers sometimes, right? And there's no shame in seeing that. Well, so I have to know though, Elijah, what is your unpopular or controversial Godzilla opinion? This is my favorite question.
Mm.
Spill the tea, Elijah.
Okay, I know. Okay,
It better not be hateful toward Mothra.
it's not. It's not
Okay.
related to Mothra's like very, very, very like stretched out connected to this.
It's okay. I have a strong soul. I can handle Mothra hate.
So I think the thing that people will fight me with, and I think it's primarily because of recency. I think that's the reason. The MonsterVerse. Oh boy. Um, the MonsterVerse has, and I actually just had a conversation about this not too long ago. The MonsterVerse shifted from a franchise of creatives to a franchise of board executives. And you can really see that as time has went on. We know that Michael Dougherty had written what was labeled as the MonsterVerse Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and then King of the Monsters failed to perform like they wanted it to. And following that, we saw a huge shift between COVID and King of the Monsters and just Adam Wingard as a creative. If that's, I use creative lightly with him. Um, I don't like him. Anybody who says it's a giant dumb monster movie, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any sense. Isn't on my birthday party invite list.
Oh.
um so I have a strong disdain for the Godzilla Kong crossover movies, because it's very clear to me at least that Adam Wingard is more so of a puppet to listen to what Warner and Legendary want, and not necessarily make a film that he can fully back and say this is art because this is why I did it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which both Edwards and Doherty and Roberts for Skull Island can really say.
Yeah.
They never once said, "Oh, it's a big dumb monster movie. Who cares?" But Adam Wingard has multiple times said that,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I don't like that.
No, that's totally fair. That's totally
There's
fair. No.
layers, and he ignores layers. That's my problem. It all goes back to layers. He does not have layers.
So, like, I think, and people may eviscerate me for saying this, I personally think that Godzilla X Kong: A New Empire had more layers than Godzilla versus Kong. Granted, it's been a while since I've watched that prior movie. I probably should do a fresh rewatch. Um, But I felt like in that follow-up film, he was like, there was still like kind of like that mindless fun that seems to be thematic in what he does, but I felt like there's a little bit more care with regard to the kaiju, at least, if that makes sense. And completely disagree with me if you want.
You're saying that because Mothra was better in Godzilla Kong: The New Empire than she was in King of the Monsters. And I agree. I will agree.
Transparent. It's because we could see Mothra. That's what made it better. We could see Mothra.
She looks better too. I like the gold over the blue personally.
It wasn't a quick glimpse of her and then, humans running away. Like, oh my god. Anyway, okay, I love Godzilla King of the Monsters. It's still probably my favorite MonsterVerse film. But I am so irritated. And like I'm still I think I've talked about this even during a therapy appointment. I am so irritated that the battles in that film, at least the non-Godzilla Ghidorah-centric battles, just seem to be suggestions. They were just like, oh, there might be a battle here. Like Rodan having a 3-second interaction with Ghidorah. Mothra versus Rodan being like fleeting, over sensory jostling aerial battle. Anyway, I do love that film, but I was much more happy with the Mothra we got in Godzilla X Kong.
I will give you this. I think that the zero gravity fight in Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is some of the most fun I've had in a MonsterVerse movie in a long time.
It was wild. Like, it was also kind of ridiculous. But mind you, if you're gonna pull off ridiculous, at least make it fun ridiculous.
Yeah. And like Godzilla like jumping off of rocks and like using his tail as a like whip is really ridiculous and funny. And I think before that, I remember in the theater for that movie. I've never felt this before, but I was sitting there and I yawned. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to fall asleep. This thing is exhausting. It's loud noises. I feel like Brick from the Anchorman movies. And then that happened and I was like, oh, I'm having fun. What is this?
No,
it went away afterwards.
But... Well, I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily a controversial opinion because I know other people who share that opinion as well. Well, okay, so shifting gears slightly. If given the power, what Godzilla film would you either want to create, or what direction would you take the franchise, and explain why?
That's a very difficult question. One that I have asked myself for decades now. That's a hard question, okay?
Hey, I know how to write a question.
Well,
sorry. I shouldn't laugh. Oh.
It's hot in here. Godzilla as a franchise is, there's a lot of movies, and it's rather difficult to make something that doesn't feel really derivative. And
Fair.
That's something that I would strive to not do. I would not want to make a derivative. I would not want to make a movie that's mindless, energetic fun. I would want to make a movie with enthralling characters, specifically that adjective. I have an image because this is a question that I like mull over every couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
At the top of this, I mentioned like if somebody gave me the story like the power to write a story for Godzilla, I'd have a heart attack because like it's like when you ask AI if it's its own thing or if it's just like a computer and like it's like trying to articulate that. Like that's how I feel right now. Um it's it is a question that like I have images. I have
Mhm.
like shots of Godzilla that like I would get really giddy and have butterflies in certain places.
Mhm.
Like just that image is like oh perfect.
Mhm.
Um I have cried over a shot I've done in some of my projects. So like I 100% would cry. um
Mhm.
I I know what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't do something like Adam Wingard. I would not do the stupid blurry this is okay. You got to rant a little bit about Mothra and King of the Monsters. I got to say this. Every
Okay.
Hollywood movie in the last like 10 years, if you watch it, they have this digital effect on the lens. They're trying to make it look like an analog lens where like the corners are blurry and it's like this weird like all the corners. It's not just one scene either. It's like everything. Like they could be in an office building and the corners are blurry. I don't want to
Mhm.
see blurry corners. Give me a nice crisp image. That's what I want.
Hmm. Fair.
And I can't stand Kong Skull Island or King of the Monsters or Godzilla versus Kong. It is atrocious in the New Empire. Oh my god. Oh, I
I guess
remember in
I've
the
never noticed that.
yeah, I've
A
ruined it for
layer
you.
that I've not
Yeah.
noticed. So now I'm gonna go back and rewatch it and be like, there's the damn corners that Elisha was talking.
But see, now that I've pointed it out, you will never not see the blurry corners. Every corner is
I'm gonna
blurry
be
in the
like twitching
entirety.
while I watch the movies now. Oh
It's like
well.
everything else is in focus, but like not the corners. Why are the corners not in focus?
Mhm.
Um, so I would wanted to make it about something. I would want to say layers, layers. You know, I would want to make a nice Onion Godzilla movie. I would wanted to have plenty of layers, a plethora of layers. That is something I guess across the board, not just Godzilla, but like kaiju, tokusatsu, science fiction, horror, dramas, comedies, romances, rom coms, whatever you want to talk about. I like a film where thoughts put in. I like art where thoughts put in. I
Mhm.
like cinema when thoughts put in. Whenever you're doing something like for a board of executives to make money, where it's just dumb. Like if you sit there and tell me, "Oh, this looks cool. It's dumb fun." That's when I shut down because for me, I mean, I talked about it at the top of the show as well, like the idea of like there's layers and there's thought put in
Mhm.
to, you know, why the world of kaiju is the way it is or like
Yeah.
all monsters like all of that comes back to the fact that my personal opinion is if you put thought into something, it will show. And
Yeah.
if you can see that thought, then you've won. One of my favorite things to do, um, and I've done this for like my audio commentaries and whatnot, is like break down scenes. Like what's the framing? What is the staging? What's the lighting look like? What is the thought behind the scene? What was the technical aspects that made this so perfect?
Mhm.
Um, you know, one of my this is not Godzilla, but an extension in Tokusatsu into J horror.
Mhm.
There's a movie from 2001 directed by Kyoshi Kurosawa called Cairo or
Mhm.
Pulse. And in it, there's a scene that I call the Red Room scene, where there is essentially in the movie, it's if you put red tape around the edges of a door, it's the forbidden room. You are
Mhm.
not to open that because if you do, you're going to the other side, the spirit realm. Well, somebody does because he's like, why is there red tape? And he goes in and it's this dimly lit room. and there's like a couch and there's some weird drawing on the wall. And then in the background we see like this black figure move. And then it cuts and we have like this nice like open shot. It's blurry and it's dark, but it's just it's a static shot of this, and it's a woman walking with this weird operatic music in the background. And then the woman like trips, and it's like really unsettling with the way she's tripping.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this very slow scene that builds up to a big crescendo, and then we don't see what happens. And if you like break down the scene and you like look at the editing decisions and the lighting and whatnot,
Yeah.
like it's really remarkable. And that's probably one of the most unsettling scenes I've seen in any Japanese horror film.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you do more research into that scene specifically, it was actually taken from a 1993 made for television series called Hontoni Atu no Kawaii Hanashi, or Scary True Stories. And there's an episode where there's a woman who is walking. It's a static shot, and she trips and falls, and it's all right there. And it's really cool to see stuff like that, as well as like the bloodlines of cinema. The derivativeness. I know I mentioned I wouldn't want to make a film that's derivative, but I think sometimes that does creep in a little bit.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's unintentional. Guillermo del Toro says he never watched Neon Genesis Evangelion.
I mean, I feel like there's a distinct line between taking inspiration from something and then being derivative, right? Because when you think about it, like it comes back to that whole debate about originality. What really is originality? Or is it just like this construct that we've created that is inflated? Because everyone is inspired by different pieces of art, literature, media, right? And one could argue that, is there originality? Are we all being derivative to a certain extent?
Right.
Is it a spectrum of derivativeness?
You of anybody probably knows this a little bit better than me or anybody who's probably listening, but you've probably heard of the theory that there's like 12 stories, like 12 original stories, and everything is a derivative of those stories.
Yes, I have heard that before.
I've always that's such an interesting idea. It's like, okay, so there are 12 possible story plots, and essentially everything ever made, whether it's a movie or a comic book or a book or a manga or a TV show or a special or a theatrical play or whatever, it is derivative of one of those 12 stories, those key original stories. And then just tracing back all of that, one of I'm trying to remember, and we're not going to dive into this topic specifically, but I was talking about stories and the lineage of it. And one of the things I think is really cool is a lot of stories from the Bible you can see in modern day, and it's probably unintentional. It's just stuff that happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes people point it out, sometimes people don't. The idea of good versus evil, the classic concept. And I'm not an expert on literature, but I know that specific book, the Bible, is very old. So the fact that those ideas transcend time, Shakespeare's the same way. Those are old stories that we see even to today's standards. Forbidden love, Romeo and Juliet. We see that idea, rom-coms use that concept all the time. They're not trying to draw from Shakespeare specifically, but
even Godzilla has set the stage for so many other kaiju films, right? I mean, one could argue that Godzilla also was influenced by Kong in some fashion, because considering how long ago Kong came out before Godzilla. So I think that there are inspirations and connections to these different things. And, again, like we could examine that spectrum of like how far does it venture into being derivative, right? But also, are there any aspects that are fresh? Because sometimes there are, right? So, well, I'm nerding out now. But I want to know, here is one thing I want to know, Elijah. Looking back at the entire Godzilla franchise, which scene in a Godzilla film shook your younger self? And does it still have the same impact on you today?
I've been very, very vocal about how much I love Terror of Mechagodzilla. And I know for a fact my first impression ever of Godzilla on the big screen, or just Godzilla on screen, film Godzilla, is a low angle, dark shot of Tokyo. Um, I think it's Tokyo. I don't remember. Um, we see this black figure rise above the buildings, and then it cuts away, and then we're back to Titanosaurus and the humans, and all the music is gone. It is silent. You hear the sirens, and then we get this shot of the landscape of the buildings, and then we get a shot of Titanosaurus roaring and cackling,
Mm.
and then we get this weird blue flame that goes and hits Titanosaurus, and he falls back, and the building behind him explodes. And then we cut to the low angle shot of the city again, and then there's a zoom, and then the studio lights turn on, and then Akira Ifukube's music starts, da 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 da, and you see Godzilla's face lit up, and he roars twice, and then we cut to a beautiful. I love dolly shots. We cut to a beautiful dolly shot of Godzilla and Titanosaurus ready to duke it out in the middle of the city.
Ooh, that's a good one. And that one still, you're still shook by that when you watch it, even to this
Anytime I
day.
see a dolly shot, I get a little too excited in some places.
Ooh. Do you want to know? Okay, so what scene shook me? And this is probably going to be so predictable of me to say. It is in, so contrary to what people think, Godzilla vs. Mothra 1992 is not my favorite Godzilla movie, nor is it my favorite Mothra movie. But I think it has some of the most beautiful, serene scenes of the entire franchise. The scene where the Cosmos run up to the window and at sunset and start singing the Mothra song, and then like over the course of those scenes, like there's beautiful, like this beautiful Ifukube track with them singing interposed with like the destruction that Mothra is creating, gives me goosebumps every single time. It still is probably my favorite version of the Mothra song, even to this day as well.
Ifukube was cooking, as the kids would say.
It, oh yeah, and like I know that film, like he reheated his nachos from 1964, right? Because that film very much was fan servicey to people who loved the original Mothra and Mothra versus Godzilla. But even though that film has so much fan service, they did it in a way that seemed refreshing. And it made the derivativeness not seem as exhausting. Granted, that is my opinion, and I'm sure people disagree with me. So
I haven't watched the Heisei films in a long time. But I do remember one of my like favorite things about specifically Ghidorah, Mothra, and Mechagodzilla is even though they're supposed to be remakes, they do not feel like they feel very independent. They feel very much like oh, this happened once before, but we're going to disregard that and do our own thing. And I
yeah,
think that's a really, really good idea. And I think that in that regards, those films are executed very flawlessly with, preventing the remaking nature of a lot of films to kind of like go through and be obvious in those.
Absolutely. Well, I do have one final question for you, Elijah. This has been a wonderful conversation. Um, if a person wants to get their friends into Godzilla, what advice do you have for how they should start?
Okay. So I feel very confident in this because I had to do this recently. So my girlfriend has seen my room. She has seen my at this point 10-year-old wallet, 11-year-old wallet. It's a Godzilla 2014 wallet that I've had since 2014. Um, she has stalked my social medias for months before we even were dating. Um,
Romantic.
she has watched a couple of my podcasts um, to see like what I did. I told her you're gonna have to watch these movies, and she said okay.
Oh,
And so I picked five specifically. I was like, okay, here's your five like movies. If you don't like these, you don't have to watch the rest because asking somebody to watch 40 movies is a big ask, and I'm not going to do that to somebody.
yeah, for sure.
So I said, let's try this sampler. If you don't like any of these, I just we'll call it. You clearly can't see what I see, and we're just going to move on. So we started with Godzilla 54. She loved that. She liked it. I don't think she's loved any of the films, but she liked that one. She hated Emiko, which was a really weird and cool like thing to like hear like somebody like give their input on like how honestly awful of a person Emiko is. I've
Hmm.
never thought about that, and she like that was the one thing she kept talking about. Um, Followed by Ghidorah the three-headed monster, which she was like, I don't like this one. I feel like I'm missing too much information, which was
Fair.
interesting because like I've never thought about that. Like I saw Ghidorah before I saw Mothra versus or Mothra or Rodan or King Kong like that was like my second or third Godzilla movie, so that was weird. Terror of Mechagodzilla. She was okay with it. I think she ranked that as number three. I
Okay.
think it was three, number three or four. It was number four.
Hmm.
Ghidorah was five. Godzilla 54 was number two. Then we watched Godzilla Final Wars. And I was like, okay, so this movie, like, if she doesn't like the rest, she's not going to like this one because, like, this is too crazy. You know, Ryuei Kitamura is an acquired taste. And she was like, that movie was so fun. I love that one. That's number one. She loves Manila. That was her introduction to Manila, and she likes Mothra. Um,
Oh,
she hated that Godzilla and Rodan left Mothra to fight Ghidorah by herself.
right. Right. Oh,
She wants to watch the Mothra trilogy specifically.
oh my God, I'm gonna cry.
I'm gonna show her the other Mothra movies first, so we're gonna do Mothra versus Ibra.
So I need a full analysis and breakdown when she watches these.
We
Um,
do post Godzilla recordings. So like I turn my camera on my phone and she just talks for 5 to 10 minutes.
I love
So
that.
I'll have to send you the Rebirth of Mothra movie.
Please do. Now, like, I think that's a good way to like coax people, like if they're interested in getting their friends into it. Like, pick a select few. Like, don't
Mm,
oversaturate or overburden because
it's a lot.
that will really turn people off, right? Because Godzilla is a big franchise, whether we don't think of it as a big franchise, but technically it is a pretty big franchise. So, well, Elijah, I this is your opportunity to share any plugs. Where can people find your stuff, etc.?
Well, the one I'm most frequent with is I'm the host of the podcast Kaiju Conversation. We have been struggling to get our episodes out. We've recorded like four, and we've got one of them out. But I'm sure that's going to eventually change as we get back into the swing of things. Um, I personally, if you found anything I talked about with like the context of these movies, I would implore you to go listen to those. We talk about the wide world of tokusatsu, so talking about like the co-productions and how like that impacted kaiju cinema is actually discussed in our Green Slime episode, which is coming out soon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and stuff like that. So, you can learn about kaiju, tokusatsu, Japanese horror, science fiction, all of that, and just kind of the landscape of Japan at the time, like in the entertainment industry. So that's one of my most proudest things is like watching those. Specifically starting with like episode 25 and going from there. There's like almost 100 episodes you can pick from. But don't start with the originals. They're rough.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't use a microphone. um, so stuff like that, like that's I implore you. You can find our socials, kaiju_converse, or if you just want to get the whole rundown of the show, www.kaijuconversation.com. That'll give you everything you're looking for. I am a filmmaker. I am I've directed a couple short films. Some of them are available if you know where to look on YouTube. But the one that's kaiju oriented that is available publicly is SOS Seek Shelter. It was a challenge to create a giant monster movie without a giant monster in it. That was shown at G Fest a couple years ago. Since then, I've done a film called Edo Kami no Gyakushu. That's the title. Which is actually people on Letterboxd know about it because it's on a couple lists, which was weird.
Hmm.
Like it's not available. It's Well God's Counterattack. That has a giant monster in it, and I played the giant monster, and it sucked. Being in a big black furry costume, not good, especially in a air conditioned garage in the middle of summer. Not
I can
good.
imagine that would be very challenging.
It was bad. But I do that, and I'm actually attached to an upcoming anthology movie called Amityville Endgame, directing a segment called The Amity Q. So I don't know the release rollout for that. I imagine it will be available on streaming I'm going to guess within a year. That should be available on streaming, maybe Blu-ray and DVD. I'm not sure. It is the third film in a trilogy of anthology films that is supposed to be like SRS Cinema's grandiose finale to doing Amityville films. Speaking of SRS Cinema, I am a member. Not legally. I'm outsourced. I am a freelancer for them. I've worked on a good amount of their. I've worked on every kaiju and tokusatsu film they have done since 2023. So I've been with them now for 2 years. The only one I haven't done was Well Shark, which was coming out at the same time I was working on my first film. So I've worked on Yuzo, the biggest battle in Tokyo, which is available on Blu-ray and DVD through SRS Cinema. You can order the DVD on any major online retailer, and that's the same for all of these titles, or the Blu-ray on srscinema.com. Following that, I worked on Liverleaf, a horror drama adapted from a manga. That was really cool. That's honestly one of my favorite titles I've seen from them. Let's see. Actually, let's see. After that, I want to say it was War of the Ninja Monsters. No. Oh my god. Wait, I think it was War of the Ninja Monsters. Jiron versus Gora, Shinpei Hayashida, director of Rigo, Raiga, and God Raiga versus King Oga. His newest movie, I did a commentary. I was a co-commentator on that with my friend Danny DeMana of the Godzilla Novelization Project. You can check him out. Godzilla Novelization Project.com or Danzilla93_GNP. I have his links memorized.
I always struggle with Because I always think I'm just going to type in Godzilla novelization project, and then I'm like, oh wait, it's not that.
Um, so I did that with him, and then I worked on a movie called Sharkdemic, where I wrote liner notes, I did a audio commentary, a video essay, and helped secure like 3 short films and a music video. That one was a whole thing. I am working on Outer Man right now. Actually, I'm in the process of finishing the script for the audio commentary as of this recording. I got to work with Minoru Kawasaki on it, which was really cool. I am working on Dene's Chaos, which is a upcoming Blu-ray, which also will have Dene's Kick and Dene's Q. Those are Dene's movies. They're
Mhm.
shorter in length, but I'm going to be doing an audio commentary, video introductions, a video essay, a couple things there. They're releasing Wake Up the Death Treasure, which is a 8mm kaiju movie from the 80s. I'm working on that one. A trilogy of Ultra Q-esque movies called Visual Bandits from the early 2000s, all from the same director as Death Treasure. I'm working on that release. I think that's all we've announced so far, but there's another trilogy in the works, and then more films in the works.
Wow, you've been busy.
I
You've been so busy.
I contributed to a book called Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kids Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote a review for Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, and I got a Rondo Hatton Award nomination for that. I worked with Titanic Creations on their Youngary articulated figure that is almost sold out now. They have an X Plus coming out soon. Not X Plus, but like an X Plus styled figure coming soon. And I might have more announcements coming soon. I have potentially another label I'll be working with in terms of audio commentaries and bonus features and all that stuff. So I'm very busy. I do a lot.
You like that pressure. You do. You do. But like that's great though. Like I think keeping busy is great. And I will have links in the description section to a variety of these things. And of course, don't forget to go follow Elijah. Go follow Kaiju Conversation on YouTube. You can also listen to Kaiju Conversation on streaming services as well. So please go check those out. Elijah, it's always wonderful to have you here. So thank you for always humoring me. So
I had a lot of fun. This was really enjoyable. We have the theme. I'm sure that'll be somewhere in your title. Elijah has layers. Don't ask.
it's gonna be there. It's gonna be there. No, so everyone, don't forget to click like for that pesky algorithm. Subscribe to the channel as always. Growing Up with Godzilla premieres mostly every Sunday these days at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much for supporting the show and everything that it does. And don't forget, most importantly, to keep standing tall, Godzilla fans. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.